Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here today. My name is Jeff Perkins. I'm the CMO of QASymphony, and we are broadcasting live from our headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. We have a great webinar for you today entitled Where Testers and QA Fit in the Story of DevOps. We've actually had almost 2,000 people register for this webinar, so clearly this is a topic that is interesting to many of you. Before we get started, I just want to run through a few quick housekeeping items. First, the audio for this webinar is delivered through your computer. There is no dial-in. Just make sure your volume is turned up or use a pair of headsets. If the audio is choppy for any reason on this webinar, it could be your internet connection. You might want to move closer to your wireless router or hardwire into your internet service. You can also try changing browsers. We found that Chrome and Firefox generally work the best. You are able to customize your webinar experience by increasing or decreasing the size of the widgets on your screen, or you can just minimize them altogether. If you have any questions, just enter them into the Q&A widget you'll see there on your left, and someone's standing by to help you either with technical issues or if you have questions for the presenters. If you want to see the presentation just full screen and you want to get rid of all the other stuff on the desktop, in the upper right of the presentation slides, you can see this little box here. You can just click that and you will make the slides full screen. If you want to go back, just hit escape and it will take you back. So that gives you some options to customize your viewing experience for the webinar. The webinar will be recorded and available on demand after we're done. You will get an email with a link to the recording if you want to watch it again, or if you want to share with your colleagues. We will be taking questions at the end of the webinar. We'll probably save about 10 minutes, so just use that Q&A widget on the left, and we'll get to as many questions as we can. At the end of the webinar, you'll be asked to take a quick survey. Please take a second and tell us what you thought of the webinar today. This really helps us improve for future webinars. If you have to leave early, there is a little icon in the bottom of your screen there. That's where you can pop up the survey. So before you jump off the webinar, if you could just pop the survey and answer a few quick questions. This helps us improve for future webinars, and we really appreciate it. So that's all the housekeeping items. I just want to tell you about a couple upcoming webinars you might be interested in. Coming up on March 1st, we have a demo of QTest Pulse. This is our new continuous testing solution that's built for DevOps. So this could be interesting to some of you who are on this webinar, so I encourage you to check that out. Then on March 8th, we're very excited to have thought leader Paul MERRILL with us. Paul speaks at a lot of the big testing conferences like Star West and Star East. He's going to be talking about best practices for test automation. So this is going to be a great session. I encourage you to check it out. If you look on your screen, there's a resources widget in the upper left, and I put some links in there that'll let you register for both of those webinars. So while you're watching this webinar, feel free to go ahead and register for the next one. And finally, one last thing before we get started. I want to tell you about Quality Jam. This is our software testing conference. And now it's only 54 days away. So we're really, really excited. We have a great lineup of speakers, thought leaders like Keith Klain and Michael Bolton, practitioners like Jana Loeffler from Disney will be there, Jeffrey Hammond, who is from Forrester, will be there. So really an exciting lineup. You can buy tickets at qualityjam.com. And if you are interested in attending, we're going to give away a free ticket today. So just send an email to marketing@QASymphony.com, and we will enter you to win one free ticket to Quality Jam in April. So again, we hope we'll see many of you in person at our event in a few months. So let's now get on to the main event today. I want to introduce our speakers. The first is Sunil Sehgal, Managing Partner of TechArcis, and Ryan Yackel, the Director of Product Marketing for QASymphony. Guys, I will hand it over to you.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Yeah, Sunil, really pumped to have you here today. I know we met at a lot of coffee shops to kind of go over this presentation, and we've definitely wanted to bring this presentation to the masses here as we're kind of talking about a lot of things, and we talked about this earlier, that we could have broken up this webinar into probably 5 to 10 different segments, right? So what we're trying to do today is give an overview of what we think QA fits into this story of DevOps and continuous testing, continuous integration, all those buzzwords you're hearing out there. What we want to do is walk you through an agenda, but end with some practical tips to help you get started. So we don't want to be all theoretical here. We want to help you kind of go to some other resources besides this webinar here. And then we also want to have a Q&A session at the end. As you all have attended, you either are curious about what this role means for you as a tester, or you really kind of want to understand where DevOps is going and how you're going to fit in that. So we want to hear your perspective. We also want to respond to that. And before we get started in the agenda today, we definitely want to look at some questions and poll you guys real quick on some things that will help us shape this webinar as we talk to things. So the first question is, what development methodologies and processes is your organization kind of doing today? And you can select all that apply, right? You may be doing a waterfall type methodology. You may be doing something that's traditionally agile, whether doing your Kanban or Scrum, or you've got different organizations, or different parts rather, doing something called Agile Fall, right? Just a mixture of those. And then DevOps. And if you're not doing any of those, select the others. So go ahead, quickly select those. And as we're selecting those, we're seeing that we've got a huge respondents in the Agile space. So others are saying that, yeah, we've got kind of DevOps that are in our organization as well. And it's kind of interesting is that you've got a kind of a split between waterfall and Agile Fall. So almost 50% of you are doing something that's a mixture between Agile and waterfall, but some of you all are also doing something that's on the more higher end, which is DevOps in Agile. The next question is, how widespread of the DevOps adoption is across your organization? And just kind of keep this in a little bit of perspective here. If you look at some of the stats that are out there, for the most part, it'll range from 13% to 20%, depending on, industry-wide, how many people in the industry are actually adopting this. So I'd like you to select to see how that looks. So looks like we're kind of on par with the industry average of people that are responding. 25% are saying that they've got widespread adoption of DevOps across the organization, whereas you've got some where you've got zero adoption, which was around 20%, 50 adoption around 15%. So a good mix of people that are either adopting a widespread and of course you look at that very minimal part where you got 5%. That's really around, they're saying, yeah, we're 100% DevOps in our organization. And the last one is around tools. So as you look at people, process, and tools, the kind of shape, even from waterfall to Agile to DevOps and even so on, right? You've got a host of products that are kind of around that tech stack. What's your tech stack look like? And this is just a subsection of the plethora of tools that are out there. There's even too many to even look at. So if you have more than one of these, go ahead and select these. And kind of no surprise here, we're seeing Jenkins, Selenium, Jira definitely, as you look at kind of looking at process, Agile, looking at kind of how to track stories, and then GitHub for source code conversion. So we've got, I would say the major people that are here, right, you all are using adoptions or tools that I would say are industry standard. So why are we here, right? And thank you all for taking those polls. Why are we here? Well, the main reason why we're here is that we know that what's going on in the industry right now is that software is eating the world, right? If you look at all the things that are going on in an IT shop or an insurance shop, or if you are creating airplanes, right? Whatever business you're in the business of business software, right? You can't if you're not a Facebook or a Google, that doesn't matter anymore, because what's happening is that the speed is the new currency of IT and for business. You need to get your products out there as fast as you can to keep up with competitive demand and competitive things that are out there. We know that development is accelerated, right? You had the waterfall introduction back around 1970s, and then the explosion of Agile back in the 2000s, and now you've got this kind of parallel going on between people who are still doing a lot of things in Agile, but now are adopting more DevOps practices. So there is a market demand that's shifting out there for you to adopt these Agile and DevOps practices. And we know that, of course, as well, that version 1, they do a great report every year, and this is a great report you all can go look at. It's called the State of Agile report. It comes out every year. They even were saying that it's only around 4% of the respondents this year are working in a completely traditional or non-agile development organization, which means that only 4% of the people that responded are saying that, yeah, we're not doing agile, we're not doing DevOps, we're not looking to enhance our development processes, right? We know that. However, when it comes to DevOps, and this is a great slide that I pulled from Jenkins World, another great resource for you all to take a look at, is that there's this thing called DevOps soup, where you've got all these different words being passed around, right? You've got things like DevOps being said, you've got DevSecOps, you've got Scrum and Jenkins, and you've got, oh, we use Subversion, we use GitHub, you've got all these things, right? Test automation, automated deployments, Chef, Puppet, all these things, right? But it's hard to take a grasp on this DevOps language, right? It's hard to understand what that is. So we're going to break that down for you really easily and just kind of describe, in our words, kind of what DevOps means and talk about, well, what does that mean for the tester? So from a waterfall perspective, this is what we had, right? We had a very slow, heavy focus on documentation of designing something. Then you would develop something that would, and this could be interchangeable. You could design something for 6 months and really only have coding testing for 2 months, right? And then you deploy it, right? This long iterative process that took forever for you to complete really ended up being something that took months at a time. You were 3 to 9 months out. This is something I was very familiar with working in my past jobs where we weren't full-scale Agile, right? And then when Agile came along, it's like, okay, we're going to break this up even further, and we're going to say, you know what, we want to get to a point where we're releasing, weeks at a time, 2 to 6 weeks, and we do that by implementing a lot of this process automation, which means we're doing a lot of stand-ups, and we're breaking things down into user stories, we're breaking things down into incremental changes for us to get things out the door faster. However, even with all this going on, what's happened is that there still was a blockage in the actual deployment of that code into production. So development said, you know what, we're going to evolve even further, and we're going to break these incremental changes down even further. We're going to make the teams even smaller. We're going to combine the development and our operations team, so we're deploying hours to days, or even every couple of days, right? So you're seeing this getting faster and faster. And there's a great quote out here that I think really encapsulates what DevOps is. And DevOps is really, if you boil it down, you're saying it's a set of practices intended to reduce the time between committing a change to a system and that change actually being placed into production. And there's a big asterisk here, while ensuring high quality at the same time. You're saying when a developer takes something, they're coding something on their machine, and they're saying, you know what, we want to get this out into production as fast as possible. We want to slice that down as further as we can and get it out there as quickly as possible, but also ensuring quality at the same time. This is where testers come in. We think, okay, well, we're a part of ensuring quality, right? Where are we at? And this is kind of brought up is when you look at some of the diagrams that are out there in DevOps, that infinite loop that you all see probably around you type in DevOps images or DevOps. You go to the image section in Google, you're going to see something like this, right? And sometimes they've got the test part in there, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes you're just seeing something, oh yeah, we're going to plan something, we're going to put it to the branch of code, we're going to then merge it, and we're going to build it, and then we're going to push it out into production. And what this has done is kind of got this fear around, okay, well, if we're breaking these things down even further, developers are taking more ownership around maybe the testing, do we even need QA? And there's even a lot of blogs out there that I would encourage you all to go look at. Great discussion from ThoughtWorks in an article called "Is QA Dead?" They say no, but there's a great catch title there for to talk about. There's one on DevOps.com that says, yes, DevOps is killing QA, and there's some great comments down there and below from testing professionals like yourselves. They're saying, no, that's not true. So there's a lot of things going on right now in the development world, in the marketplace, where people are talking about, is QA dying? Do we even need QA? That handoff that we have. And a lot of the objections that some of the developers or operations teams, what they're saying, are things like this. They're saying that, why is there such a big pushback? Well, they're saying, well, testers really can't fit into a true CI and CD environment, right? And developers can just be the testers. We don't really need a true handoff to test automation. They don't use my developer tools. Testers slow us down. We don't really need those, right? I'm sure, Sunil, you've probably heard this a lot of times when you're talking with some of your customers.
Yes, absolutely. Like in terms of, talking to the numerous people in the industry and the different customers, I always hear about these things, but my belief there is that, testing is fundamentally changing. For sure it's changing, right? And testing is not dead. But the question is that, who's going to the testing and how it is going to be done is the key question that needs to be answered. And I think like that's where we are going to focus a lot in terms of today's discussion, and when I'll share my thoughts in terms of what do testers need to do to be successful in this Agile and DevOps. I think that's where we need to focus, but testing is definitely not dead.
Right. Yeah, and we know testing is not dead because, number one, QASymphony is in business. We've got a lot of testing products that are out there. And we're talking to customers daily. They're saying, hey, we're going from a waterfall to agile state. We're going from a agile to DevOps state, right? And we've also got people like Forrester saying that, yeah, if they take a look at their state of agile development, they pulled and they saw a whole range of different testing activities that were going on in organizations that were saying, yeah, we are doing agile and we're doing DevOps, right? You've got 82% of those respondents from these large corporations saying, yeah, we're still doing manual testing, right? There is some component of manual testing that is always going to be there. Same thing with exploratory testing. That's going to be there. They've shifted different testings into different methodologies, like maybe doing BDD and TDD, right? That's not as high on the list here, but what you've got is, yes, testing is still going on in organizations. Aside from just the unit testing that we're seeing there as a second point, there's other types of testing that's going on, and it's needed to ensure quality. And we talked a lot about these things that we're going through right now, and we're really boiling it down to, there's 3 points here that we want to talk about, and Sunil's going to walk through this. In this kind of state of, okay, where's DevOps going? Where's QA fitting? There's really 3 things kind of going on. One, there's disruption of plays. So you all probably came to this webinar, a lot of people probably came to this webinar thinking, what's going to happen to my job, or what's going to happen to the testing world, right? The same thing happened when Agile came about, right? And a lot of people are still just adopting the way they're testing they're doing. There's also this focus on continuous quality. We said earlier that DevOps is all about getting something out into production as fast as possible, from when one thing has happened in the system to production, but also ensuring quality. So how do you ensure continuous quality as well? And then there's also a demand for test automation and different automation that you're going to be doing. So with that, I'm going to let Sunil kind of walk through these 3 things and kind of where we're seeing testing going.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Thanks for the great introduction and setting the context there, and thanks, Jeff, as well. I think I wanted to take a minute to go back to the polls that came in earlier, and one of the things like that was catching my eye was in terms of the Agile thing, and which was as high as 90%, which is absolutely fine. But I just wanted to little bit share my perspectives of being into the trenches, working on numerous projects, and talking to hundreds of people. See, today, whenever I'm in those meetings and those discussions, and when we ask anybody about, are you doing Agile? I think the 100% of the people kind of say yes to that, which was kind of reflected in these polls as well. But really the crux lies there is when you start to go into the details and then start to see, who's really successful at doing it. And I think that's where a lot of the differentiation starts to come between the organizations. And if we start to map it on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of the maturity and the success factors that come, right, we normally typically see that about 25% of the organizations or folks have really invested heavily in it. They are very serious about it, and normally you would see them on a scale of 7 or 8. And there are a couple of reasons for that. Either it could be inherently in their DNA that they could be primarily engineering organizations, product development organizations, or as an organization they have invested a lot of time and budget and got a lot of external help from the consultants and all to get it done. So that's kind of one thing I just wanted to pinpoint. And then there are a lot of the organizations which on this scale of 1 to 10 are typically towards the lower end of the spectrum, about 4, 5 and all. And these guys are trying hard, and sometimes these are smaller companies as well who are trying to learn it and figure it out on their own, and that's kind of where they would stand. And then the rest of them are kind of in the middle mark, about 5 or 6, where they have figured out at least how to implement it. But nevertheless, wherever you are in the course of the journey, stay at it, right? It's not easy, it's hard, but it's not impossible, as well. And I think that's some of the things that I just wanted to a little bit focus today and kind of sharing a little bit more further thoughts into it. So going back to the point that Ryan was talking about, the first one being disruption. See, the fact is that disruption is all around us, and it's a reality today, right? And disruption is happening at, various angles, and you hear the word innovation, in the smaller companies, in the big companies, and that's just the reality. We see it at Apple, like they have changed, everything around the smartphones. You see around Amazon eating everybody's lunch, right? You see, things around, even in the car space, like, BMWs, Mercedes, it's a different type of the innovation, but innovation can be in the form of technology. It can be form of, like any, mechanical product you are making, but the main goal and the main focus here is that when you start to zoom onto the customers, right, quality and convenience drives customer success. And that is really changing the way, how the products are being built, how the product managers are thinking, how the BAs are thinking. And that's really at the fundamental of making sure that you thrive in disruption. So with that particular thing, software development is also changing. And I think that's why we are having this discussion, and we have this interest from a large group of people, as Jeff pointed about, 2,000 folks registered for it. So software development is inherently changing, and automation sits at the center of it. I just want to point it out in a very clear way that that's the truth, that's the reality, right? And the variance of the automation will change, but when you are talking, really the new way of developing the software, we have to embrace automation. So Agile and DevOps is the new norm, and of all the progressive companies that we see, of all the progressive teams that we see, they have definitely made a commitment to embrace this. And Agile and DevOps is definitely the way to go, and that's what we are seeing in numerous clients. But really the crux starts to come from our vantage point. All of us, we are all part of, the same group here, the industry testing community here. So really the thing to focus here is, continuous quality. I think that's the main thing that, where testing teams need to zoom and also start to focus on these words like speed, right? And while we said that everything, is evolving, there are disruptions, and you heard about that, developers, talking about that testing is irrelevant or slowing us down. That's not the case, right? So we have to start to put these things together about continuous quality at speed in this disruption. So one more thing, that I normally, share with the people, whenever I'm in any of these meetings and, meeting my peers in the industry, I think we all need to start to little bit challenge the definitions here. So see, everybody talks about DevOps, which is fine, right? But I think from the testing community perspective, it just gives an impression, right, as if testing is not required, right? So you just develop, you just roll it out, and you just hope that it is developed right the first time. But it couldn't be far from truth. There is nothing like you get it right the first time. So from the perspective of the correction that, we need to put into the definition is, move test into the middle of dev and start calling it DevTestOps. So I would, highly encourage, everybody to wherever possible, start to push this DevTestOps, because that makes it amply clear that testing is required and testing sits in the middle of it. So fundamentally, whenever anything is being developed, it's really simple. You develop, you test, you roll it out. Right. So I think once this definition is clear, then we are definitely, on the table along with our BA friends, our PM friends, our developer friends, and, testing is sitting, at the table, and then, we are definitely in the game. But the context from how testing needs to be done and who's going to do it, right, is altogether a totally different, question and a topic, right? And I think there, I would say that, definitely from a testing perspective, we need to step up, as a team, as a community, and make sure that, as I was pointing before, embrace this whole thing about the Agile and DevOps. So this is a very key important element in enabling the continuous quality. And with that, I'm going to get a little bit more deeper into this stuff. And rolling on to the next slide here, see, it is very important to understand what does continuous means, right? And continuous is used as a very loosely term, right, in all the things that we normally, come across. And a lot of people, like talk about the different definitions, and you often hear these things about continuous delivery, continuous deployment, and all those things. So I think, at the heart of the whole thing lies that we are all trying to develop the software, develop the code, or, do the upgrades to our code or the patches to the code with the intent that it should reach our customers, right, kind of like on a real-time basis and on a, nearly constant basis. And I think that is where, the struggle is, right? That is where I think also it becomes fun as well, that, how we are able to do it. So let me just kind of like, start to get into the details and, try to draw the fine lines between these different words and focus on this continuous thing. I'll start with this continuous delivery. So continuous delivery, like, when you look at today to when you look at the old world is different, right? We talk about, rolling things out in 2-week sprint, right? There are organizations who are rolling things out daily. There are also organizations who are rolling, code out on an hourly basis. But like once we compare it to our, old-fashioned or previous world, we were all, doing product releases and development, quarterly, 6 months, 1 year, but that, does not apply anymore. So from the context of the continuous delivery perspective, our goal here is to develop the code, to test the code, and then to release it. So what you see here is, in this process, in this chain, as you move from unit test to the platform, to the staging, and so on, all these things are automated, right? But really, it's like these organizations, who are focused on this continuous delivery are fine taking all the way to the production-like environment. And I think that's where, a little pause comes into place, because going into the actual production, that's where, like a lot of the other factors kick in and some type of the manual intervention starts to come in. And that could be a scenario of test data management, availability of the test environment management, or, there are certain other processes that need to be followed, right? And this transition that happens to the actual production is kind of like highlighted in that red color.
And one of the I think that for most people, if you were never really introduced to this type of staging approach, right, you may have heard or talked with your business unit or team or whatever about, hey, we're going to now deploy it into this environment or that environment, right? And there are certain things that were going on from those stages, right? I remember when I was at a retail company, we'd have our unit testing was going on, then we roll that into a testing environment, right? But what you're doing here is that, just like Sunil was saying, you've got these automated checkpoints that are in place there. And then when you get to the point where when you're actually manually pushing something out into production, I think there's a lot of companies out there that are not allowing them to get to the next phase, which you're going to talk about, which is continuous deployment, is because they still want to manually push something into a production-like environment because they're just a little hesitant on getting that out into the consumer, right? They want to test it manually. They want to do some user acceptance testing that can be fully automated. They want to do those types of things, whereas you've got companies like Amazon and Netflix are doing this continuous deployment method, right?
That's right. And see, the key thing here is, while the intent is very clear, right? It's like the code is being developed and tested to make it production deployment ready. So that part is absolutely, lies at the center of the whole thing. But from a continuous deployment perspective, as Ryan pointed out, I think that is the gap that is bridged here. So when you see that, between the continuous delivery and the continuous deployment, that is the minor and a subtle difference where you are able to deploy to the production environment also in an automated fashion. So it's very important, like to understand the differences here, because these are the foundations to how you will set up your shop and deliver these things. The last thing that I wanted to point here is this continuous integration. So without continuous integration, none of them is possible, continuous delivery or continuous deployment. So continuous integration is really the mechanism and the process, right, that truly enables your continuous delivery and continuous deployment. And this is where, like you start to get into those CI servers. This is where you start to get into what you guys were polling before about Jenkins, about Bamboo, those things. So that is what really makes it happen when the code is developed by individual developers and, they test it at that individual level or at a branch level. And when it starts to get into the CI servers and it starts to get connected to the other branches, and then the integration start to happen at the staging environments, the QA environments, and then it starts to get plugged into the main line of the code. So that whole thing is, really the continuous integration, and that enables both the continuous delivery and the continuous deployment. I hope, this at least, gets little clarity on this continuous thing. It's a very, important and a big topic. So within this limited time, at least, I just wanted to share my perspectives on, how they are different.
Yeah, I would say there's a pretty high chance that there's people on the call here that are doing kind of what Sunil said. They may not be doing all the way from left to right. You may be saying, yeah, Ryan, we have Jenkins, right? We have Jenkins that goes and kicks off all our automated tests, but then we still have to do some validation that's not necessarily automated. Or, every time that we check in our code as developers into GitHub, we've got a request that knows to notify and run all these other unit tests that Jenkins knows to go and run, right? But it may not be all connected at the same time, right? So again, I think there's different layers and different levels of DevOps maturity that a lot of people on the call are probably at, and then that's what we see a lot as well. And then, how do we, if you think about, what would be the three things, Sunil, that we can think about when we're actually thinking about, okay, well now what can we do to enable DevTestOps, or what are the three main things we can think about?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think in terms of, the enablement part, that's where the rubber meets the road. So really, we are talking about, this whole thing about quality and speed, and these things that we are talking about, DevTestOps, how to enable it, right? So the number one thing, I think, from where it starts is having a clear focus, right, on this DevTestOps, what we are trying to achieve, and, how far you really want to make it in an automated fashion that we were talking from the previous slide. So I think that will change and vary from organization to organization, and that should, be established upfront, because it is better to break this challenge and this issue into smaller pieces and look for those success and those low-hanging things. Otherwise, it really becomes hard to boil the ocean here. So that's kind of I would say on the point number one. On the point number two, right? See, the reality here is that testing has to run very, very fast, right? And what I normally see, testers typically get called on Wednesday night of the second week, right, in these 2-week sprint cycles, and Friday it's due. So invariably, a lot of us struggle, right? We just basically struggle for the fact that, it's not being done the way it should be done. So really, we have to look at the ways how to, start early on, and automation will sit at the heart of the whole thing, because as development is running 100 miles an hour, right, testing also has to run at 100 miles an hour, and simply taking an approach of the manual perspective is not going to cut it. The number three thing, which is absolutely, another key area that we should, talk about here is the enablement through the right infrastructure. So depending upon the scenarios, whether you are talking about the continuous deployment or the continuous development, your underlying infrastructure will change. Your underlying selection of the tools will change. So especially, when we start to talk about, automation in the context, right, of this in-sprint automation, we have to use those tools and those platforms, that will enable that. And, we have used things like OpKey and all, that really helps us achieve that. So selection of that right infrastructure, right, becomes a very, very important point there.
Yeah, and then I got some tips for you all, kind of on the line of kind of getting that focus geared towards this DevTestOps thing.
And I want you to talk about that pizza. How does that pizza help in putting that DevTestOps?
Exactly. So we're going to show a picture of a pizza here soon, and I'll definitely talk about that. But first is, you've got this automation first approach that you're going to take. So what that means is that you're always going to be looking for tests you can automate right away, whether that is something that you're going to be doing as your in-sprint validation points when you're saying, hey, you know what, this user story is 5 points, but guess what, the automation that goes with that, for us not to have a huge backlog in the future, we want to make sure that we're also including that in the sprint work. That's looking for what can we automate first. That may be taking a TDD approach or even a BDD approach to your testing. The second part is looking to pair up with developers to actually see kind of what they're doing on a day-to-day basis and how can you, either through black box testing or white box testing, learn to code the test faster and also through automation. A lot of times you've got the developers totally disconnected from the testers where they're kind of in their version control systems or in their IDDs and they don't really are kind of talking with the test team. But with DevOps, what you're doing is you want to break those teams down. This gets to your point, Sunil, about this pizza. And what that means is that if you ever look at, if you ever Google the Jeff Bezos Amazon 2-pizza rule, it's a very big thing that he rolled out kind of when he's still at Amazon. I think it was back in 2009 he rolled this out. But it's basically saying this, that a team should be no larger than 2 pizzas that can feed that team. So think about everyone gets 2 slices of pizza, you got a team of 8, right? You don't want to have over a team of 8 in your DevOps working team. And that, what it allows you to do is to think small and think even really, really, really small. And that means is the fact that when you're in DevOps, you're breaking things down into measurable chunks, even further than maybe a traditional Agile environment, because what you want to do is be able to deploy sooner, deploy faster, and if anything happens, you can roll that back. And with that, you're also going to get smarter about the analytics that you're going to be reporting on. So you want to be getting deeper in, okay, what are the tests that are passing and failing at each stage of our pipeline? And that means setting up different reporting engines, different reporting tools that tie into the tools that Sunil talked about earlier. They're going to drive that continuous integration process. So tools and reports that hook into things like Jenkins and Bamboo or Circle CI, and they can radiate feedback to development when anything is caught or is broken in that particular pipeline. And then now we want to kind of go through and say, okay, well, yeah, we got these great tips, but what does an actual in-sprint workflow look like, right? What should the tester be focused on when they're going through an in-sprint? How can they make automation a part of that?
Yeah, so I think like this is very, very important to really, understand how to do it, right? And so let me just kind of like, share little thoughts here in terms of, how, we have been implementing it. So really, it's very important to understand the construct of the sprint and what type of the activities happen in the sprint. How is the testing community, going to align to like how the code is being developed, what the developers do, and, kind of like a lot of the time they have the lead on it. So definitely, from a testing perspective, we need to make sure that we align to that. But one thing is clear, like when this sprint starts, there are user stories, there are defined acceptance criteria. And I think that's really kind of like the starting point or a common starting point for everybody, all the members of the sprint team there. So from a testing perspective, I would say that, we need to kind of like start to focus and gravitate to this starting point as well, because there is a lot of huge value, and that's where, we need to understand how we can start, from day one as well. So when the developers, looks at the user stories, they understand the acceptance criteria, they start their development work against the user stories. So this is also the time, the same information, same data is available to the testing team as well. So through this, progressive automation, right? And progressive automation is going to be very different from the regular standalone automation that, all of us do. So in this progressive automation, we have to start doing, the automation right based on those user stories and the acceptance criteria. And we basically start to build the automation framework and write our scripts, as the development is happening. But we are going to make sure that we constantly align with the development team, both from a requirement perspective, from the app flow perspective, and all the other things that matter to stay in alignment. And as the code is ready, from the development team, so at the same time, like our frameworks and our scripts are ready on the automation front as well, and we do this mapping. So as the tests are run, things will start to point back to where the failures were happening, and those feedbacks are going back to the development team. But invariably, sometimes it happens that the fault lies with the testing team as well. We didn't build the framework right, or we didn't, script it right. So those things will be pointed back to the testing team also. And then, things will either be pass or the fail. and the code will be checked in, and also like it will be like, added to the sprint suite, and then they get rolled into the Jenkins and the Jira. But this whole concept, right, in terms of the progressive automation and doing it even when the scripts are not, even when the code is, not ready, I think this is where, like lot of the new way of things are and are going to be like, very, very important if you want to like start the testing from day zero. So couple of, things that I just wanted to very important highlight here, right? So day zero test automation for in sprint is very, very important. If we are really talking about, success in the DevTestOps, that's something that we have to like, really embrace and do it. It's not going to be easy. Like we have seen it on a standalone automation things also, that, building something which is, hassle-free and low maintenance is always a challenge. So here it is going to be like an even bigger challenge, but nevertheless, like we still have to do it and design it in such a way that our frameworks and scripts and everything, are going to like really make it, low maintenance thing. And then the third important aspect is that, we have to really kind of like tie it back to those source code branches, and so to make it like a totally, completing the circle and the, iterative thing, these are some of the key things that, I would, focus on, and these are kind of like very practical things that I wanted to share with you.
Yeah, thanks, Sunil. Yeah, and so one of the big things, if you were to look at, for example, that particular circle that is usually that infinite, this honestly gives me anxiety sometimes when I see this. It's like this never-ending loop, right? With Agile, you had, we're going to do some loops in the middle, and then, you release it and you're done, right? Well, with DevOps, you're not done, right? You're never done. But with that, one of the key things that drives this process is tooling. And we've really talked about the planning, coding, building, testing part of that. But you really need tools to drive this process. So from a planning perspective, you'd be looking at tools like version 1 or Atlassian products as well to plan those. From a code source management perspective, GitHub and GitLabs and Bitbucket and also Subversion, these are still source code repositories where everything ties back to, right, to make sure that the version of the code and the version of the test are being tied into that build pipeline that's going to be either triggered by open source tools like CircleCI or Jenkins, and also things like TeamCity, Bamboo, but also tie it back into any testing frameworks as well. So if you're going to be writing, as Sunil talked about, writing your test in like a Cucumber framework that's tied into, from a BDD perspective, that can easily be mapped back to the version code, right? If you're going to be running some functional automation through the UI, you can also tie that back to the version code, and you can have all these tools working together. One of the big things I do want to say is that with DevOps, you really need tools, right? From an Agile perspective, if I was talking to you, say, yeah, we do Agile, the main thing that I would ask you all would be things like, are you guys doing daily stand-ups? Are you doing sprint prioritization? Are you doing retrospectives? Are you, creating, well-defined user stories, right? All those things really don't require tooling, right? You can tell me, yeah, we had a great stand-up today, or you can make notes of the retrospective you had, right? You can take cards, put them on a wall, and move them from to-do to in progress to done, right? But with DevOps, you're really trying to accomplish all these things, even with chat ops in terms of using something like Slack or using things like HipChat to tie back to alerting developers as well. All these tools are necessary to achieve the automation that is not only around test automation, but also deployment automation and also feedback automation in terms of your entire test team.
And Ryan, I couldn't agree more with what you just shared here. And see, like, all the money in the last few years and all, innovation also has primarily gone onto the development side. Right. So we see like, lot of those tools, platform technologies that got built. And, from a testing perspective, we got left behind for a while. Like it just kind of like became that, it's more of a skill thing. Yeah. And it's more of, like you try to like do at best, we had some tools. Yeah. We all know those tools, right? But, like the definition here is the true platform, the true, technology-based platform. And I think that is what is, really required to elevate the testing to come and become at par with the development platform. And that is where the true integration happens.
Yep.
And that's where, it's like how the true, CI/CD will happen. So I think very, very valid thoughts that you were pointing there, that technology is really, really key for a successful, DevTestOps.
So let's talk about getting practical, right? We've talked about a lot of good things today, but really we want to do, before we get to our Q&A in 5 minutes, is give you some practical things that you all can take from this. So one is, and I know Sunil, you'll definitely kind of have stories about this, but one of the things is being a proactive volunteer. So proactively volunteer when they say, hey, you know what, guys, we're about ready to start a new pilot DevOps project. Don't even let your manager or the project lead finish their sentence. Say, yes, I volunteer to be a part of this. And this is actually what happened with me when I was kind of at a large retail company doing testing there. One of the things is we were going from waterfall to agile, and they said, you know what, we're going to start this lean pilot program. And nobody really knew anything about agile or lean or any of that in the organization. And I jumped at that opportunity to say, you know what, yeah, I want to be a part of a smaller team, a way to actually embrace some agile practices. And that's how I got started. My first actual experience with doing more like Scrum, traditional agile. And the same thing can happen with DevOps, right? Again, there isn't a super large scale of this across your organizations just yet. So you want to make sure you can get on the forefront of that. And then the other thing is attending conferences. These are just two actual sessions that are going to be at Quality Jam this year. So Adam Satterfield, again, this was just one topic that we had today, but Adam's going to be talking about the role of the tester in a DevOps world in one of his sessions. And he's actually going to walk through a whole session about all the testing he's done from working at Better Cloud to now being a VP at a very large IT services company, kind of how he sees the role of the tester changing in DevOps. And then Angie Jones is one of the big thought leaders that's going on right now. She's actually going to be speaking at SCPCon in Phoenix, and then she's going to be coming into our conference. And she's going to be talking about how to get automation included in that definition of done that Sunil talked about earlier about how do you get this in-sprint automation going, right? So again, this is just from Quality Jam, but if you look at all the different conferences out there, look for anything that says DevOps and testing and go to those, right? Get budget to go to those, see if you can make those, because that's going to help out with this ever-changing story around what's going on in DevOps and QA. And then the last point before I give it to Sunil to wrap up and get to questions is that you need to learn and listen around test automation. Joe Colantonio has got an amazing website where he's got podcasts you can listen to, he's got classes, he's got an automation guild you can be a part of. He's an amazing resource that's, for the most part, a lot of stuff there is free resources for you to go and learn all things test automation, all tool agnostic automation as well when you go through all those. Then for those who are looking to get more into the BDD and TDD world, they've also, you've got Cucumber's been around for a while, and Cucumber's, if you've been to their website recently, it's blown up. You've got a school there now. You've got different sections on their website that shows you how to get more involved with Cucumber and get your whole team on that possibly. And then there's a new framework that's out there that's behind the people that actually created Selenium. So ThoughtWorks is coming out with a framework called Gauge, and it's an amazing framework for testers that are looking to use a very simple, plain text, easy to follow structure of syntax for creating their tests for automation conversion into Selenium WebDriver. So it's an amazing new framework that's out there. It's in beta right now. I definitely encourage you all to check that out. And it's a kind of on the forefront of frameworks that are out there. It seems like one pops up every day, but definitely go and learn these and listen to those in the test automation field.
So I just want to finish it by sharing a few of the thoughts here, and a lot of this is you may already know it, but just to kind of refresh our memories. So testing in QA is not dead, my friends, right? Testing in QA is very relevant, very live. And don't be under that impression that it's dead or it's not required. It's definitely one of the essential pieces of the how the software will be developed. So testing certainly is changing. That's absolutely true, as we have discussed at length here. And I would definitely share with all of you as my colleagues here that embrace it, right? It's like, just dive into it and, like just become comfortable with it. There is a lot of learning that is required. But the reality is that, DevTestOps is, an essential and a very critical piece to this world of disruption, and thriving in disruption is important for your organizations, for, whatever business you are in, and, you just got to like embrace that. And one other thing, is like that I just wanted to focus, because we have talked a lot about the automation today. So there are lots of, tools and technologies there, like which help us, do even with the minimal, coding skills and all. And those are the, things that need to be looked at. And manual testing, is definitely always going to be there. Is there like, there are a lot of things that need it. But, like in this, fast-paced thing and, how things are going, manual testing is not going to be fun. It's like just jump, like learn a little bit of this, the TDD, BDD, that, automation thing that we were talking about, and, just kind of like, ride the wave, have little bit, more fun at it. The other important thing here is that distributed teams, right, with the QA embedded in the sprint is the new normal. And I'm pretty sure that all of you are seeing it. You are part of one or the other, sprint teams. And that's just, the way almost it's happening in, a majority of the organizations. I know like some of the organizations have, still been there in terms of, the centralized, QA teams and all. But that's just, going away. Decentralized is really where things are. So the test center of excellences and all, which were kind of like the big teams, that's, dissolving. The lean TMOs, are definitely very relevant and very helpful today. And I think like some of these things will even become more important, especially from the context of the QA managers, because oftentimes they get caught in between, right? What do they do? So I think, like from my experience, it's better that, like if they also become hands-on, jump into the trenches and help enable DevTestOps. I think like, you are going to like have more success and fun in that. So with that, I'll turn it back to Ryan.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to give it to Jeff, because Jeff's got a ton of questions that have come through kind of on the webinar today.
Yeah, guys, thanks so much. Great stuff. Just a couple things. Reminder, if you have to jump off now, just if you could just pop that survey tab at the bottom right. Just take the survey, let us know what you think. If not, you want to hang out with us for about 10 more minutes. We're going to answer some questions, and the survey will pop up at the very end. I want to tell you, because we got a lot of questions about it, the webinar will be available on demand. You'll get an email with a link to the replay right after the webinar, so keep a lookout for that. Also, we're going to do a recap that's going to be on the QASymphony blog next week. We'll have the slides available there, so check the QASymphony blog sometime next week for a recap of the webinar. So with that, let's jump into some of the questions we got. All right, first question. What should be the priority or investment in automating UI versus microservices with regards to continuous deployment delivery?
You want me to take that one? Yeah, so if you look at, there's an automation diagram out there, and Angie Jones, I think, would adhere to this model as well. If you just kind of Google and say, hey, let's look at what layers of things that you need to be automating, you would see that the UI part is actually at the very top of the pyramid, which means that there's a lot of times there's way too much focus on all UI automation. So I would say that, one, automating the UI for starting with your automation there is not the best approach right away. It is something that can and should be automated if you're getting further down the road, but looking at automating unit tests, automating the API layer, automating those layers of testing that are below the UI first is going to get you in position where automating the UI later is going to be better. So I would just say go and look at that automation pyramid diagram. You can Google that, and I'm sure you're going to get a lot of resources on that, but that would be kind of my one take there.
All right, next question. Doesn't automation have to happen faster than the speed of development? If not, then how does automation benefit the developer to meet the acceptance criteria?
Maybe I'll take this. Yeah, that would be excellent, to be ahead of the curve than the developers. But I think means happening at the same time, right, so that developers can benefit from it, right, is equally good enough. And, this, even this particular stage, a lot of people are not there, right? So I think what we were talking in one of those flowcharts out there, that the automation was available exactly at the same time when the code was developed, when that mapping was happening. And that's, like from today's perspective, really helping, just kind of like being perfect alignment with the developer. And our thoughts are that, it's good enough at this time, but, if there are ways to like get ahead of the curve, that would even be better.
Yeah, and one of the things I would just add to that is I think a lot of times there's a disconnect between that speed of developers and the speed of test automation, is that there's a disconnect between where tests are living as it relates back to the source code. So getting back to working on all tests tied back to maybe a master branch or the branch that you're working on, that's going to easily help out the development and the testing organization connect with the same code that's actually being developed, right? So you're not having to take these tests and then, if they're not automated right away, you got to merge that into another repository where you've got your tests running from some other code base, right? Always tying that back to the code base is going to help out in that regard.
Great. This is an interesting question. Have you actually seen a true CI/CD organization that really works? And the point this person's making is that for DevOps to happen, you need a high level of skill, which includes a good amount of programming knowledge. What are the skill sets that testers are going to have to know and adapt to and learn to be able to thrive in a DevOps environment?
Yeah, I would say one thing is that I talked to Sunil about this. When we talk about automation and CI and CD, a lot of times people think that like literally everything goes away in terms of any type of manual process that you have to do, right? So in terms of true CI and CD, I think that there's an ideal out there that people think of that's just like not necessarily possible. We actually have a continuous delivery team at QASymphony that actually works on our new product, Pulse, and they're a team of around 10. And the way they actually go about and run their executions and run the creation of the product is a true CD environment. And they can do that because they're a small team. They can take their tests, they can version them back to a particular code branch. When that code branch has all their tests done and they want to deploy it into production, they have automated processes in there that once that gets merged into that master branch, it kicks off a build into production. So there is still some types of manual processes that are going on in that organization. They're not a bunch of robots that are sitting in the building next door doing all this, right? Sunil, there's that.
Yeah, and I think just to add to what Ryan was saying, that is absolutely true. It's not like, automation is the only thing, right? And that's not true, right? So from a true testing perspective, there are a lot of other things. I think in context of the DevTestOps, yes, automation plays a very important role. But, you are only building certain pieces of the software or the full software, depending upon the various cycles. But the fact is, there are a lot of other things that happen after that. It has to be, truly deployed in an enterprise. It has to be integrated with a lot of other systems. So, integration testing, performance, security, a lot of those things kick in. When you take it live to the real customer, before that you will do, mobility testing. So there are a lot of, skills, lot of the different aspects of the testing portfolio which are required. And, we just don't want to leave with an impression as if like it's automation or nothing. I think like it's a lot of other skills are absolutely, valid in that whole end-to-end scheme of things.
Yeah, the last thing I'd say is just like, I would even say this to, another, I would say the same question, I guess, back to the person who asked this and say, have you ever seen a true, entire organization do everything they're doing following agile processes, right? There's going to be some mix and matching of things in organizations, just like, for example, if you were to look at, how Amazon deploys everything, right? Amazon is doing an amazing job at DevOps, right? But usually when you're talking to them, it's usually their .com folks, or it's the team that runs the website, right? Or the cloud infrastructure deployment teams, right? But all of Amazon isn't DevOps, right? They've got different pockets of organizations that are going from Agile to DevOps, right? So there's still a lot of transition going on in organizations. I think that Amazon's a great use case, and Netflix is one of their great use cases for DevOps and how that works. Etsy is another one. However, I would say there's other different types of technologies possibly in your organization that maybe restrict you from being as DevOps as you may want to at some point.
Great, great. Sunil, thank you. Ryan, thank you. Great session. We have a lot more questions. What we're going to do is we're going to answer some of them in a blog post on the QASymphony blog, so check back next week for that. We'll also repost the on-demand link and the slides there. But this has been great. So once again, everybody, thank you for taking time out of your day and joining us. And we'll see you on the next webinar. Take care. Bye-bye.